So thank you. I appreciate everybody being patient with us. My name is James Britt. I'm Director of Public Engagement, and I want to welcome everybody to this conversation with the Africa family, Debbie, Mike Sr., and Mike Jr. How y'all doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Great. So just a couple of housekeeping things. The genesis of this conversation is twofold. It coincides with the artist Karen Olivier's exhibition, Everything That's Alive Moves, which is currently on view at ICA. The show's title is taken from a phrase articulated by MOVE founder John Africa when he was asked by a reporter to explain the origins of the group's name. This program also aligns with the calls for justice that were spurred on by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rashard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain, and so many others by the hands of law enforcement. Unfortunately, what we are witnessing today is all too familiar. I'm honored to be in dialogue with Debbie, Mike Sr., and Mike Jr. to share their thoughts on the continued fight for justice for Black people in America. The format for the program this evening will be conversational. We'll talk for about an hour and either take some questions or continue the dialogue depending on how everything flows. If you want to ask a question, you can do so via the chat function, and your question will be collected by the moderator, Natalie Sandstrom. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the recent passing of Delbert Africa. His transition from this earth took place on June 16th of this year. So where I want to begin is just where we are in this current moment. And I want to ask you all, what does this mean for you all? Like, what are your feelings? What are your thoughts about what's taking place with the protests? And the issues relative to justice for Black people. And just to preface too, Mike, I was present at the rally at Malcolm X Park, and I had a chance to hear you speak and some loved ones from other people that currently still are incarcerated. So.
Excellent. So the question is what this means?
Correct. What does this current moment mean to you and your parents?
For me, this moment to see the uprising of people stand in defiance of tyranny, to stand in defiance of police brutality, for people to stand up and resist the system of oppression, it means a lot to me. It's also like vindication. You know, MOVE has been putting out information and standing up to the injustices in the system for a long time. And to see people rise up on this level all across the world to make a change for the better, it's vindicating, and it feels really good. And I hope it continues.
Debbie and Mike?
Well, I agree, because as far as the uprising, and it's almost like finally people are waking up to realize like this is just absolutely crazy and ridiculous, especially in this time, because all these years, decades, centuries, this is what poor people and Black people and people of color and people who are not seen as upstanding citizens in the society have experienced at the hands of the system, at the hands of officials. And finally, it's like, oh my goodness, even they feel, even the people, the white folks, the small businesses and people that are seen as acceptable people of society, they're starting to see like, wait a minute now, this is just too much. And this is where all this is coming from. Like, people are starting to really feel like, wait a minute. They're starting to feel compelled to want to do something to right the wrongs of this, and it does feel good, because you feel like, or you at least hope that finally, people are going to get some justice, some equality. We don't know how it's going to fall. We don't know how it's going to go, but you always have that hope that things will finally start to be right.
I think that people in the past always wanted to side with the system. They always wanted to find some way, some excuse some way around it, so they would focus on certain things, like people in the streets or broken windows. But as the young brother said in Baltimore, you act like y'all care more about broken windows than y'all do broken spines. Well, the people who were making those kind of statements and trying to maintain some kind of allegiance to the system, to the businesses, to the judicial system, and to a lot of people who were engaging in a conduct that were choking people to death over cigarettes, that were shooting little 7-year-old Ayanna Jones in the head as they went to the broken house, into the wrong house. People that wanted to make excuses for them in the past see that they can't any longer. That is the fault of the people who allows these things to continue. That needs to be focused on. And that's why you see so many diverse groups in the streets, and all are protesting and all are calling for a change.
So could you all talk about this shift in consciousness? Because I've been surprised to see this, because I've experienced this just like everyone else. I think back when I was young, it was Rodney King for us, and the fact we all saw what happened on the videotape, but yet nothing took place at all. But there seems to be a fundamental shift that's taking place in terms of how people are perceiving, in particular how white people are perceiving these things. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I know Mike spent some time in Richmond as well. And to see those Confederate statues come down on Monument Avenue, to be honest with you, I never thought I would see that happen. So, and to see that it's not only Black people that are advancing that charge, but it's white people, it's Asian people, it's people of many different, ethnic, cultural backgrounds. So I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are in terms of why that shift is taking place, and what that shift is
about. I think that shift is in large part coming because people are much more interconnected than before. When things are as segregated as they have been in the past, it's hard for people to really see each other for having feelings. I know that there's been studies done that show that some white people believe that Black people don't have feelings, and hospitals, doctors are taught. Different communities have put out studies to show that doctors are trained to believe that Black people's feelings are not the same. They're tougher, their skin is thicker, and different things. So when you can see people and you see the light dimming in the eyes of a man because the police officer is kneeling on his neck, and those things are being broken down in people, and people can see it. I think it's like similar to the way people thought about animals, how people thought that animals didn't have any feelings. And, John Africa, always taught Move and others that all life that is alive has feelings. And people have been taught this, that they don't, but we're really seeing that, life is very connected. We're really seeing that the people are connected to each other. And they're angry because they saw what happened to George Floyd. That it was similar to what happened when Rodney King was beat the way he was. I remember that day. And, people are seeing their own selves in that situation. They're seeing their children in that situation. The police kill a lot of Black people, but they kill a lot of white people too. And people can see more. And Will Smith made a statement. He said, racism isn't getting worse, it's just getting filmed. And the compounded amount, the people, every time you turn on the television, every time you turn on the news, you think it was something that happened years ago, but it's something that's happening at the moment that you're turning on Facebook. Facebook Live is showing you this thing happen live, and people are up in arms, and they're uprising because of it.
Debbie or Mike, would y'all like to respond?
Yeah, I think everybody's traumatized, man. I think the diverse groups that comes out because they're also traumatized. They're being linked to something that they don't want to be linked to. They're being linked to everything that, this system has repeatedly said it stood for. Colin Kaepernick took a knee, and they call what he did as unpatriotic and even linked it to violence. All Black folks have to be is present to commit a crime. That's the way the police seem to respond to the presence of Black folks. And they don't care whether it's captured on tape, whether people are coming by and screaming at them to stop, or whether they hit the streets, and even in the midst of this, while everything is being captured, they still, went out about spraying people directly in the face, beating people. They didn't care whether it was being filmed, no more than that guy who kneeled on George Floyd's neck cared whether he was being viewed or not. So that tells you what kind of training they're receiving. But regardless, people are tired of it, man. And they're tired of being linked to it, and they're traumatized by everything they're seeing, just as, Black folks are. They're tired of it, man.
Can you talk a little bit more? You mentioned systems a number of times, and I know that that's something that John Africa, the founder of MOVE, he talks about frequently as well. So one, if you can contextualize that in terms of systems, specifically what you're pointing to, and I'm sure it's probably like racism and capitalism and other systems and structures that continue to marginalize people, but also if you can provide people with an overall, and that's just not directly to Mike Sr., but everyone, if you can provide people an overview of MOVE and what John Africa teachings espouse, just so people can have a context for that.
I can speak to that. John Africa started the organization with the interest in protecting life. And John Africa taught us that life is the most important thing. There's nothing more important. There is nothing as important. And when we're talking about life, we're talking about people, animals, and the environment. And as a result of having that understanding, that is what, really brought the heat on MOVE. Because when you're fighting for the release, fighting and understanding to get people to understand that life is enslaved, life is in prison. The animals don't want to be in the zoo. They're put in the zoo just like the people don't want to be in a prison, but they're put in prison. They're taken from their millions of acres of freedom in Africa and brought into and put in a tiny cage in Philadelphia. Those tigers that were, roaming the freedom in India were taken from India and put in a circus and forced to jump through rings of fire. And John Africa explained that tigers, they're not supposed to be jumping through rings of fire. You know how hard it is to catch a tiger? What do you have to do to a tiger to get them to jump through a ring of fire? That's intimidate. They intimidate them. They abuse them. They beat them. They prod them with electric rods and poke at them with spikes on the end of sticks. And they force them. They train them. They beat them. They take them away from their families. And this is what MOVE has been protesting. So the environment is under attack, extreme and severe attack, unnecessary assault on the environment, in the water, the pollution in the water, in the air, the pollution. You got Monsanto, this corporation that's trying to dominate the market for food. And so they're polluting the environment so that you can't get the kind of seeds that grow certain foods, because they want to keep it all and make money and poison the food and poison the people that eat the food. They don't care, and so this is what John Africa, taught MOVE to understand, that life is in danger. All life is in danger. we're not the only ones that breathe the air, just like we're not the only ones that drink the water. All life needs it. And so, you know, when you understand and when we put out this information and you understand that the system makes a lot of money by exploiting life, by enslaving life. Prisons are nothing but modern day slave plantations. And these businesses, these business owners, these prison owners, they make a lot of money by, you know, treating people, having these people work for these low wages and, you know, farming them out basically. So this is what Move has been fighting against, and this is why we became targets.
Debbie, Mike, go ahead, Debbie, Mike Sr.
Well, that's what's meant by the system. When John Africa refers to the system, he's talking about the systematic slavery that they're doing to life, like Mike Jr. was pointing out. It's a systematic way of exploiting life, but it's really slavery, just like he talked about the animals, the wild animals that are put in circuses and forced to do what they want done. That's a system that is in place that is running things. A system of even the dog pound. It's a system. It's something systematic that is causing the wheels to turn. It's a systematic system of people that are being misused by the system to make money, to get money. Cops have to get a certain amount of tickets in order to get, to get money. All the industries, they have a certain amount of something in order to keep things going, which makes money. And so everything that's designed to make the capitalistic system survive is off of the backs of people, animals, off of the backs of life. And that is the system. That's when John Africa talks about the system, he's talking about that whole industry, big industry that just poisons the air, pollutes the soil, and the things that they need, that they go about doing it in order to make it work for them, in order to make it work for the 1%, the rich.
So then how do we dismantle these systems? I think there's been some interesting discourse about taking some radical, measures. So we hear conversations about defunding the police, for example. We hear discussions about healthcare for everyone, eliminating student debt, abolishing the prison system. So these are very radical sort of approaches that have been put out there. And I think even to a certain degree, Move itself tried to eliminate those, systems in terms of the way that the group was constructed. So how do we do that collectively? What does that look like?
Well, for me, I always say John Africa tried to change one thing. And that is the minds of people. That is the way people think. That's the way people think. And it's a big task, when you think about, pulling all these things down that are just exploiting life and just causing life to be miserable and hurt and suffer. It's a big task, and it is. But John Africa would always give people information on how wrong it is to exploit life. So whether it be in our household, whether it be at a demonstration at the zoo, or whether it be a demonstration at the circus, or at a police station, or anywhere, it was always information being put out how wrong it is, and they're being shown how wrong it is to hurt or exploit any form of life. And so that, on an absolute scale, is really the only way to do it. Because when you talk about people and you talk about trying to change things, oftentimes you get governments. One government will say no, it should be done this way, and then it moves to put on another government. But in the end, they all kind of do the same thing. They want money, they want power, and you end up back in the same boat that you started out in. But over generations and generations and generations, people really understand what's right and feel compelled to do what is right, what is necessary to keep life going and not exploit it and not hurt it and not maim it, cripple it, you know, and jail it, not imprison it, you know. That's the way John Africa message is to people.
It's like, if I could comment, it's like you can't change the world unless you can't change the world if you don't change yourself. And then the other thing is, like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, like, if we respecting other people and respecting their needs, then, you know, you're not going to be putting up a nuclear power plant that you know is going to poison the air they got to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't respect them, then you don't care about that nuclear power plant and what it does to the people and the people that live in the area and the people that drink from the water in that area, or, you know, it's a poison. So why would you put that there knowing that what it does to folks? To give somebody electricity, there's ways to get electricity without doing that. You know, so we're dealing with a system that is just about, you know, doing whatever they have to do to be rich and in control. And the way to defeat it is by extracting ourselves out of it and not supporting it. If you don't buy that, you know, that thing that pollutes the air, then, you know, you're reducing the amount, and we all have to work together so that we can do that, because at this moment, the system put money between us and the things that we need. And so we have to take these steps incrementally to try to, you know, extract ourselves out of it. But it's not easy, because, as I said, the system put money between us and the things we need. If you try to just live without having a job or credentials, your children will starve to death, because we're not in, you know, a place where we can just live free. So we have to work with each other. And I think one of the big ways that we can help to achieve that goal is to build community with each other, help each other and share resources and work with each other to extract ourselves out as a community, so that we can support each other in that to achieve that goal.
I think Mike Sr. was the one that brought this up, but it's sort of been a thread in our conversation so far that people are tired and people are frustrated. And I think in particular, you know, as Black folks, having seen this over and over and over again, a word that comes to mind for me is exhaustion. And this is something that's come up for me and my friends and my family members, and we're just kind of, you know, tired. And I'm curious, because we've all had our fair share, but of these sort of, you know, dealing with these in our particular way. But for you all specifically, with the incarceration, Debbie and Mike, that Mike Sr. that you endured, Mike Jr., not having your parents there for a significant portion of your life, obviously the bombing that took place with MOVE. I'm curious if you all feel comfortable talking about how, like, offering ways for healing in these moments that we're experiencing constantly. How has that process been for you all, and what has worked for you all?
Well, seeing the events, you know, taking place the way they are now today, having people come out who were staunchly against any kind of progressive action towards the judicial system, to you know, the bigwig administrators in this country. To see people openly question them, challenge them, is like healing. You know, to see people take to the streets is like healing. That is like therapy. You know, when you see people like, they finally understand, they finally get it. You know, and they take to the streets and they demand things. That is, like Mike mentioned earlier, is it's like vindication of everything we've been doing for the last 50 years, and the people before us for untold amount of years. You know, everybody who resisted and rebelled and stood up. It's like vindication of it all. Just like, how Colin Kaepernick must feel now. All he did was take a knee, and that wasn't enough for them. Well, if that's not peaceful enough, then what do you want? So when people come out, then you're talking about broken windows, and by people who's been looting this country forever, by the way, but yeah, it is really good to see, and it's really therapy to see, it's really justice to see that people are confronting a system that has stood on their necks forever. So the trauma that they've been seeing, and 40 years we spent in prison, and the beatings we took before prison, that they tried to say that people were on their side. Now they know better. They tried to say people were, the masses of the people were on the sides of people that, anyway, look, it's just great to see people take charge and take their power back.
That's the important thing, taking their power back and making them account for it. I personally, I don't like to see the looting of your neighborhoods. I don't like to see what they term as rioting. But the thing is coming from the people, the system, who actually forced their hand into doing something. It's like, what do you want? People demonstrate peacefully. We demonstrated peacefully in the past. You walk in a circle, you carry a sign, you do what the Constitution tells you you should do in order to get what you feel like you need, or what you earned, or what you're supposed to have. And what do you get? You walk down the street, you see more people marching, and then you see gunfire, you see bullets, you see all kinds of stuff for decades and decades and decades. And then like with the football player, Colin Kaepernick. Well, he did what was peaceful, and everybody, they shunned him. They told him, he couldn't do that, and he was disrespectful. Now they looking back on his example, saying, well, you know what, maybe he wasn't wrong after all. We should look at this way of doing things, because now you got a situation where, like Mike said, people are tired. They are like sick of it. And make no mistake about it, like Junior said, it ain't just Black people that's feeling this. We're feeling the brunt of it because we have felt the brunt of it, and that's what cops were intended to do. Cops were not here intended to stand between us and people who are hurting us. They were put here to stand between the establishment, which are rich people, and their money, their gold. They were put here for that. They were here to catch slaves. They were put here in the 19th, 18th centuries to catch slaves who, as they saw, ran away. And so that same mentality exists in them today. It exists. I mean, just think about it. Genetically, you get blue eyes from your grandfather, your mother, or different color eyes. You get all kind of different generic, diseases or whatever. It goes down through your bloodline. So just think about it. I mean, centuries ago, or a century ago, those people, the people that they have in the establishment now that are doing their bidding for the poor, for the 1% rich, they had the same mentality, and they're putting this in their children and their children and their children, and it's filtering down in their own blood. So when they see Black skin, they think, oh, you know what, catch a nigga, or do something, or capture him. This is how they actually think. Like Mike said, a training.
Yeah, so, listen, man, we don't care about buildings, and, we don't want to see anyone hurt. We don't want to see anyone else going to jail, and we don't want to see anybody victimized. But listen, man, when they talk about looting, we've been looted, man, all the way down to our souls, man. They don't see gentrification as looting, but they do. They don't see taking 2.3 million people out of the community and throwing them in jail as looting. You know, they don't see the consequences of those parents being put in jail for decades as looting, stealing lives, you know, and looting, you know, all those souls. You know, they don't see that as looting and violence, you know, but it is. And they've been looting our neighborhoods, our community, our race forever. You know, so I don't care about a building. You know, I don't want to, I do want to see people in peace, which was our fight all along. That's all. You know, so the looting, you know, they got a hell of a lot of nerve, you know, saying about a couple buildings being broken into as looting, you know, with their history of what they've done to our folks.
In the country.
I wonder when those moments. Oh, go ahead, Debbie.
No, I was just saying, you know, I mean, I had my baby in jail and prison, you know, and put in prison for 40 years because I did choose to protest against what was wrong. I did choose to take a stand against what was wrong. And for that, I got 130 to 100 years in prison while I was 8 months pregnant, had a 2-year-old baby, and I was put in jail, taken away from my son and my daughter, and had my son in prison in my jail cell, And I did not return until just this past 2018. That was in 1978 that happened. And finally was returned to my children. Now that helped give me vindication and helped made me feel good, you know, especially since since Michael Africa. This is the way I look at it. Mike Jr., I had him in prison and he came back to get me out of prison. And I mean, when you look at that kind of, I mean, you can take it any kind of way you want. That is so messed up on one scale, but it's also something that is just so miraculous and so, you know, just so meaningful. Now, he didn't do it by himself. I'm not saying that. Them kids that was in that house May 13th, 1985, that they dropped the bomb on, they gave their lives so that we could be free. They gave their lives so that we could be released, you know, and still, even after May 13th, they still was relentless in letting us be released. And it wasn't until not only did all them support our MOVE supporters, Pam Africa, Ramona, all kinds of people, our families, join in to try to get us released. But Michael Jr., at the age of a young teenager, 15 years old, out there with them, looking through transcripts after transcripts, just trying to find some type of hold that he could get to help get his parents and all the rest of the MOVE non-released. For years, he started doing that kind of work at 15 years old, and he is 41 years old. And finally, with him and all the examples of the people who have banged on those sidewalks, banged at the officials' doors, the mayor's door, the managing director, they have finally got that victory. And people can see it wasn't just MOVE, it's the system that wants to persecute people because they want to make money. And that's all it comes down to.
Debbie and Mike Sr., why were you eventually released? What was the rationale by the courts?
The rationale by who?
By the court.
By the courts, it was the parole board who finally signed papers to let us go. But, you know, as Debbie was just recounting, it was the work, the relentless work of our families and our supporters who put enough pressure on them in the same way we're in the wake of this George Floyd thing. You know, they were relentless and demanding our release. And, you know, it was like they talked to everyone. People approached them, willing to help, willing to try to get this thing behind them. And it was a perfect storm of sorts.
And finally, it just left them no way out. Like after all the years that we have been in there with all our example and what we showed to them as being people that they consider as good people, you know, they didn't have. It's like their hand was turned because like we had the example behind us to show that we are good people, and it just took all that, you know, to put it in front of them and to say, look, and shove it in their face. So it's like you really left them no way out. I mean, they could have, but it would have just looked so bad, especially in the wake of the administration, the official administration in Philadelphia right now, with the way that they are, you know, the tides are turning as far as, you know, trying to do things for like juvenile lifers and just for people who are sitting in jail for nothing, because not nothing. I don't mean nothing in a way of not committing a crime or allegedly committing a crime or being put in prison for unjustly, but who are all so older now that they're getting to the point where keeping them in jail for what? And this is what they were saying: keeping them in jail for what? They're old, you know, or they're doing so, you know, like there's nothing that they can contribute. They would, you know, like what is the point? They're just wasting taxpayers' money, like Mumia. I mean, he's on death. He's in jail like all these years. Like, and what harm are they going to do as far as that? You know, these are people who, you know, that they can release.
Yeah, this reminds me of a quote by Toni Morrison that racism will disappear when it's no longer profitable, no longer psychologically useful. So I'm curious. You know, you talked about vindication, and it definitely can be very satisfying, but we all know as Black folks that we've had vindication, but we've had a lot of moments where we weren't vindicated, and that unfortunately that seems to be more par for the course. So I'm curious, what was able to sustain you all during those moments when it didn't seem like you were being vindicated or you were being acknowledged? What got you through during those time periods? Especially, I would think during that long time period where you were incarcerated. I think even for Mike Jr., when not having your parents present, it was really moving to me when I had the chance to see the interview between Mike Jr. and Debbie with Amy Goodman. And Mike, you had referenced when you saw your mother's bare feet and that you hadn't seen that before. You know, I got choked up, you know, just thinking about that. So, I mean, what does sustain you all during those time periods? Because I think for our community, this is something that often happens. I mean, my family is from the Deep South. They don't talk about these things at all, and it's I think a lot of it is because there's some pain and hurt and in there and anger and those type of things. So I'm curious for you all, especially for a family that's had to do this in a very visible way. I mean, a lot of people know the Moose story. This is a story that's an international story. So how have you all been able to handle that?
Well, for me, it was definitely a lot of pain. It was definitely a lot of pain. I mean, you know, when I was just my first baby taken away from me by, you know, by the cops and people who were there at the scene in August 8th, 1978 in Pelton Village. I mean, just that alone was just so painful to just see them take her from me. She was only 2, didn't know what was going on, you know, and all I could do was try to just not, you know, just try to make her feel as comfortable so she would not see me as being hurt or anything, so that she could just go peacefully. And being 8 months pregnant at that point, you know, and then going to prison, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing how things were going to go, and coming off of so many bad situations with the cops, you know, with babies being, you know, unborn babies being, you know, beat from moved women's stomachs and all kinds of stuff. And so it was a very, very, very hard time, but I got through it. The only way I got through it was I just held tight to faith that whatever happened, you know, we were just going to come out all right. And whatever happened, you know, was going to come out all right. And I had to hold on to that no matter what it was, because I didn't know how it was going to go. All I could do was fight and do whatever I could to hold on to my child, which is why I did not go to no hospital, and I had him in my cell so that everybody would know he existed, so that they could no longer say, like they've said in the past, that there was no baby, like they did in 1976, so that they could see that he was strong, that he was healthy, that he was here and alive. And every person that was on that wing of 63 women saw him. And that was my proof. That was my proof. That was my way of declaring him. So that's what I did. I reached down deep into my soul and did everything I could to protect him. And, you know, it was hard, but like I said, I just held on, and because at that point, there was really nothing I could do except that, keep my faith, you know, in my belief that, you know, there's a purpose in this, and, you know, we just have to keep moving and keep going on, you know. But it was rough. I mean, it wasn't easy. You know, I had to just dive into everything I could to keep myself from thinking about something that I could do nothing about at those points in my life, at the low points in my life. I just had to concentrate on something that I like to do or wanted to do. And this is just being real, something that I needed to do. And I didn't really care pretty much what it was. It didn't matter. Cleaning, whatever. Gardening, shoveling, raising dogs. It didn't care. I didn't care what it was. To keep myself strong, to keep myself on track. And until I was released, I never gave up hope that I would not be released.
I think for me, it was probably a little different in terms of like the faith part. I'm not a big fan of faith, really. I think for me, it's more so like, I can understand mom's thing of faith in regard to like being in prison, and that's, you grasp and hold on to whatever you can to keep you strong and keep you going. For me, as a person growing up in West Philadelphia, during so much violence and crack being the drug that people were using heavily in the hood where I'm from, and seeing the violence, seeing the people end up on drugs, and seeing the people die around me and end up in prison around me for nothing. I mean, people were killing each other. To see that and to like have that be a thing that kind of comes into your home, and, you know, knowing that the life that I was living at such a young age, I just never accepted it as being something that was good for me. I never accepted it as being something that I could not get out of. So, you know, I waited for my parents. But at the same time, I didn't wait to make decisions. Like, I made decisions and made decisions with them in mind. Whenever I did any major life altering move, and I've been doing them since I was 13 years old, I've always made them with my parents in mind, because of the love and attentiveness while being in prison. The love that I felt from my mom and my dad from prison kept me feeling like just stay connected to them and everything would be all right, because they had a level of wisdom and understanding that kept me making good decisions. So when I would make these decisions, I always did it like while trying to kind of move at the pace that they were kind of leading me at. It's very interesting to have gone through that and experienced that as a 41-year-old father myself. I can't imagine what that experience must have been like for them to have me on the phone for 15 minutes at a time and then hang up the phone and have no idea what's happening next, without, you know, they couldn't see me. They couldn't witness the growth the age different, changes. So I had to make decisions, and I believed in the decisions that I made. And I trusted that even though I was nervous about things at times and didn't know what the outcome would be, I settled myself down enough to believe that I would think about it as hard as I could. I would ask people's opinion about these decisions that I was making. And once I felt like I had enough information, I made the decisions. And that way of thinking has carried me through up to this point, with my mind intact, with my family intact. And after all these years, mom and dad are home. And that has, in large part, been because, for me, like, making those decisions very methodically, very carefully, and with information, and not just kind of like going on whims or whatever.
So what was that unification like for you all?
Oh, awesome. It was awesome. It was, man, I believe, just after all those years, when I walked in doors, man, I saw I went, Mike Jr., he was standing there, and I hugged him, man, and I was outside of the gate. I couldn't even talk. Like, I just hugged him and just hugged the kids, and, for such a long time. And, it was just, I hated, it was just awesome. It was just an awesome feeling. And it stayed with me for so long. I mean, it still does. It comes to me now still,
Yeah, sometimes we're in each other's homes and we're sitting around talking, and this is something we hadn't been able to experience all of Mike's life, and most of our, 3/4 of our lives. Debbie and I were both 22 years old when we got that 100-year sentence, and we had just had, our second son, our second baby, had not yet been born, and we, so there's a ton of stuff that we did not experience while being in jail. But as Mike said, we stayed in touch, and thankfully, a lot of love that we were trying, and a lot of love we tried to impart to them. Where so many others, that experience cause a very vast disconnect, and we try and commit ourselves to helping people reconnect. And that too is, it helps us, man. It helps us. It's therapy for us, man, helping folks see a bright side to, a lot of dark days, man. And, they're traumatized by the experiences they've seen and dealt with, and so are we. But we're thankful, so thankful, man, that our family never gave up on that fight, and that the people persevered, and, they're, no matter how it seemed, you see that fire, man, in them, and we're just thankful, man. We're just thankful that we have a chance. As you mentioned earlier, some of our family have succumbed to, illnesses that, is just, at least curious that, all 3 members of the organization came down with this deadly disease while in one prison, and anyway, I'm not gonna go down. Anyway, so to, get back to your question or your statement, you know, it just feels wonderful to be reunited with our family.
Did it feel familiar? Did it feel, there's a part of it that seems like there could be a learning process, but maybe a part of it that because it's parent and child and parent, there's a familiarity that's already built in. Was it a combination of the two?
Oh, absolutely familiar. It almost felt like, I was just talking to Mike Jr. about this the other day too. I said, you know, I was listening to a conversation that he and his wife and another MOVE person was having. And as they were talking about different people, different experiences, different situations. And as I was listening, I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know those people. I didn't know those things. And they were talking about over decades. And so it made me feel like, wow, dag, I did miss a lot. Because when I first came out and we were reunited. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm. We can hear you.
First reunite, it was very familiar. It almost felt like, you know, I hadn't even gone anywhere because that's how familiar it felt. And that's how the link that between us was there. That's because it was never broken. You know, we always tried hard to keep that link open. So, you know, it just felt like, dang, I even went nowhere. But these are these people, you know, who are my children, and here, but it almost feels like but as I listen to things and hear about his friends and hear about my daughter's friends and things that happened, I do realize that I did miss a lot. But for sure, the link, the connection has always been there, and we do have bond. We have a strong bond.
And I have to focus on that because I know there's a vast amount of things that we did miss, and in our lives as well. But you know, we have to push on. You know, we can't stay there unless that anger, you know, consumes us in a negative way, and you know, we don't choose to do that. You know, we choose to use our time and our experiences to help other folks get through maybe some of the trauma they're going through. You know, and if we can do that, you know, that's really helpful to us and them.
Mike, Senior, when you've talked about helping other people through trauma too as well, is this you're talking about within the organization, or just sort of you're reaching out to just other people more broadly? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean other people more broadly.
Okay.
You know, the people that's within the organization all have the same information I have. The people that's within the organization have the same commitment that we both share. But you know, the trauma, you know, crosses all lines, man, and it, you know, knows no bounds. So the whole time we were in prison, that's what we did. You know, most of the time I was in prison, I was there by myself. Rarely did I have another MOVE person there with me, but you know, that wasn't the point. The point is, you know, to share that information with anyone who would listen, you know, anyone who was in trouble that way, you know. So there are a lot of folks, you know, that will attest to our commitment to reaching out to them and not trying to, you know, rally them to, as the system would say, do something negative. You know, is the positivity is to reach out to your community, to your family, to, you know, to people, period. You know, when they're down, when they're having trouble, and try to do whatever you can to help them. You know, the same way we did with, you know, by demonstrating, that's what we were doing. We were showing, demonstrating something that we felt the community needed, you know, and if it was something that opposes a system that subjugates us, our community, the environment, then, you know, we encourage other folks to do the same, you know, not in a way where they, you know, like I said it earlier, if it was Colin just taking a knee, you know, they had something to say about that. So the way we did it, forcefully and, you know, outspokenly, you know, they took it and changed his intent, but the people knew what our intent was, and the people in prisons knew what our intent was, and they're thankful and we're thankful.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about moving, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense I get is that you all were predicated on love and connecting with nature. And then as a result of the police harassment, then there was a greater sense of militancy that was born out of that reaction. Is that sort of the way it transpired?
Well, you know, Mumia has a passage in his book that says, you know, he went to the police to help him and they stomped him, you know, and, you know, he says they kicked him right into the revolution, you know. Well, that's basically what's happening now, ain't it? You know, where, you know, people were just going about their lives, and then you walk past a guy with his knee on someone's neck, you know, and it compelled them, you know, they were just going to the store or something, to the mall, or, you know, just taking a walk, you know, and then you go past this scene. You know, I think that's how most actions start. You know, people just being, you know, look, man, I can't remain silent for this. You know, I have to speak out. I have to say something, man. This man was just, you know, you're accusing him of selling some cigarettes, man. Now you choking to death. You know, people get tired, man, and they, you know, you're just speaking out. So, but anyway, you know, you hate to see people in pain, and people, you know, feeling like they have no options. You know, I can't think of a worse feeling than that, man, sometimes, you know. So to give a person some example of how these things work and how, you know, remaining in a certain space does nothing but hurt you, you know. So if you help the people they intended to inflict that pain on, then that's one less victim for them, one less, you know, person that they're going to send out there to hurt somebody else, you know. And in that way, you know, we can help our folks in turn the tide about things that they, you know, they wanted to see for us, you know. So.
But yeah, we did start out like that, peaceful, as you say, peaceful demonstrations, peaceful.
We ended up like that. You know, we never stopped being it. No, excuse me.
But at some point, yeah, when they were talking about, you know, everything they had done to us, then yeah, we said, well, we're not going to just stand by. We're going to defend ourselves. You know, we're not going to just let them beat us down and just kill us off, because they had done it at that point a lot to us, you know. And but you know, kind of like bringing this back around, like part of the vindication for me with people speaking out now is the fact that maybe people now will look and say, well, you know what? Yeah, them people, they may not have lived the way we like to live, or what, you know, we may not have wanted to be their neighbor, you know, but you know what? I look at now what's happening, and you know what? Maybe the cops did give them a raw deal. Maybe they did maybe they weren't so bad, you know. So that is how it is now.
Mike Jr., go ahead, Mike Sr.
No, go ahead. No.
Okay. I was going to say to Mike Jr., your father talked about assisting others who are going through their own traumas. I know when you and I had a conversation after the Here We Stand program, you had mentioned to me that you're in communication with Mumia's kids and with Fred Hampton Jr. So I'm wondering, have you been serving, or they've been serving as a support for you and vice versa? Is that something that you have had like ongoing discourses with them?
Yeah, Fred Hampton Jr. and I have been in communication and supportive of each other for a long time, a couple of decades. He got arrested back in the 90s, and when he came out of prison, he came to a protest or some type of event in New York City.
I think you froze, Mike.
Oh yeah, it froze.
He did freeze.
Can you hear me?
I can hear him now. He unfroze.
And
okay.
You know, we've been in connection with each other and a support system for each other since then. The same with Mumia's son Jamal and his grandson Jamal Jr. And I know his daughter too. And Jamal and Jamal Jr. especially, I've been in contact with on and off for at least 20 years. And so, and it's the same for Asada's daughter and Kamal Siddiqui's daughter and countless others. I mean, we stay in touch and try to provide support. It's interesting to talk to some of these people that you met for the first time, and they are the only people that you can really talk to that really understand exactly how you feel. You met them, you know, and for the first time, and like, you know, I'm talking to Kakuya, Asada's daughter, and she's talking about being born in jail, and I'm like, you know what? Guess what? You know, and we're having this conversation about this, and as close as you get to other people, if they haven't experienced that, they really can't understand what it feels like. They can't understand how it feels to meet your mom for the first time at the age of 6. You know, you remember the first time you met your mother, you know, outside of being born, right? Yeah, those other children of revolutionaries hold a special place in my heart, and I stay connected to them whenever I can.
So where's the Move organization now? How does it exist currently? And what are your interactions with it at this point?
Well, I'm still very active in the community as far as protesting, as far as getting people out there to understand what revolution means, the importance of revolution. I'm very much involved in, lately I've been working on a film. There's this, when Mom came home from prison, there was an avalanche of ideas that came to me from people from all over the world. And they want to make movies, they want to do podcasts, they want to do seminars. I was traveling all around the world invited by people who wanted to hear the story of Move. And there's a filmmaker by the name of Tommy Oliver. He has a TV show on the Oprah Winfrey Network called Black Love. And he reached out to me and we started talking. Actually, he reached out to Ramona, and Ramona connected him to me, and him and I have been working together. And he's been teaching me about film. And so I've been working on my own little film project that actually is about children of revolution. And this is the type of work that I'm working on specifically. But as far as the organization, like my mom, myself, my dad, you know, it's important for people to get the information, and what vehicle drives the information is really whatever vehicle is available, and as many as that is available, you know, whether it's media, music, you know, protests, it doesn't really matter.
Debbie and Mike Sr., there's projects that you all are working on too as well?
Yeah, well, we're currently actually working on the Seed of Wisdom project that, I don't want to call it a project, but it's working with the Seed of Wisdom organization, who is founded by Mike Africa Jr. And he's been trying to get us to work in this for a while. And so we finally committed and said, okay. And I'm supposed to have an article due today, but I got other plans. I got to talk to him about that later.
I'm the last to know. The Lord knows before I do. That's right, Mom.
He told me, Mom, do whatever you want. I said, oh, okay.
Whatever you, hey, Mom, look, whatever you want. It's your baby. It's you. It's all you.
I said, okay. I was scared at first, because, going back to what you said at first, James, in the partially the beginning of this, and asking about the familiarity or how was it like with son and daughter and, son and parent, how we act. And, since I've been out, Mike Jr. has taken this position of there's a role reversal, and he thinks he's my father. So
no, I do not. Don't believe it. No, I don't.
I love it because he has grown into such a wonderful human being. And
James, don't laugh, man. You're encouraging her, man. Don't laugh.
I kind of know how that is. We're around the same age, Mike, and the same sort of dynamic with my mother. So it's sort of shifted now.
All right, okay.
I kind of get it.
Right,
I get it, actually.
I had, hey man, listen, I had to take charge in certain areas because, like, when Mom went to prison, you had to turn the faucet to get the water to come out. Nowadays, you just stick your hands under and electronically the water flows. So, it wasn't my fault. I just, she didn't know what a cell phone was because they didn't exist when she went to prison.
Yeah. It's all good though. It's
they teach us those things and a lot more, man. It's
oh my God, it's
that's something else we had to learn. As I said, Mike and he has 3 sisters. They were all very young when we went to prison, and some of the things they went through. Talking about trauma, some of the things they went through, man. As a result of our activism. Mike has a saying that, about people reminding people that they have to really listen to the wants of their children, and the needs of their children, when making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And how a lot of times those decisions are rash and they don't take into account the wishes of their own children, and their well-being, and it could be for a long time, depending on what kind of actions you take, kind of actions they accuse you, So some of the things they've experienced in your absence is a real learning experience too. May alter some of the decisions you make. So it is a
well, he got to plug the thing. He had to plug this thing in because my battery is running low. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So it's it's just that was a wake up too. Just listening to the views of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the things they experienced and the conclusions they came to about your commitment to, what you chose to do without, having a heavy consideration of some of the things that they felt and would therefore have to endure themselves, so that these are also things that we can share with folks and we have. So.
Yeah, I think that's before. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask how we're doing on time.
We got 15 minutes left.
7:15.
Yeah, we got 15 minutes left.
Okay. Are the questions rolling in?
No. They said they like the conversation and they want us to keep having a discussion. So you all are doing a great job.
Nice. We aim to please.
Well, one thing about me, you don't have to worry about short conversation with me.
Wait a minute, there is one. Hold on, let me see. Okay, I will read this one now. Someone asked, thanks for such an enjoyable conversation. My question is, do any of the panelists get involved? Are you all getting involved in the upcoming presidential election? And also, what about local elections like the mayor race, mayoral race, governor, senators, etc.? Are you registered voters? And also, are there any restrictions in regards to voting with, you know, being incarcerated?
Well, I am registered. I don't know about the restrictions as far as being incarcerated. I noticed you have to wait for a while or something, 5 years or something like that. Some people can. I think it depends on the charges, but I'm not really sure. I have not gone into any details about it, any research about it, or anything like that.
Hey, Mom,
That's
you registered, Mom?
Yep.
Did they try to get you to vote for Trump?
Oh yeah.
don't do it. Don't do it. I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
Yeah.
I know, Mom.
Yeah. No, I was doing something else in order to get some. Good.
You say that one more time. You kind of broke up a little bit.
Mom?
I'm not a fan of giving my power to people, to politicians. And, you know, so I'm a fan of trying to myself or, you know, those around me who need it, who I can utilize it for what I want and not take it for something that they feel, you know, and so that's me personally. Any other questions?
I just have a one to kind of close out. I'm curious, you know, what you all's thoughts are on the sustainability of this current movement, but also kind of what lies ahead for us as a society. Like, where do you see things going? Where do you hope things are going? So one is, you know, the sustainability factor is the first part, and then the second part is, what do you hope for, and what do you anticipate? Because obviously those could be two different things.
Well, for me, you know, I like to base hope on reality. One thing I know is that the police were set up, the system was set up for a certain end in mind. And you know, the sustainability of the people has to keep that in check. And one thing we know for sure is that the people who run these systems of subjugation is never going to stop. Never. You know, so it always demands a response. Whether people are going to continue to do that is, you know, as you said, you know, the question. I think they've gotten a taste of something that they do not like, and you know, but we've been here before, man. Yeah. We've been here before, so you know, I don't know, but I know the one thing I do know is that they will never stop. You know, to sustain a system in capitalism requires an underclass. And they've designated certain people to fill that role. You know, and unless people stand up and demand something else, they ain't getting nothing else. You know, so we'll see.
What I'd like to see happen personally, I ditto everything Mike Sr. said, and you know what I'd like to see happen, and this is all around. I would like to see, and hopes to see at some point in my life, as I'm thinking I'm starting to see somewhat now, people coming together as a community, working together, you know, helping each other.
Yeah.
Stop killing each other. Yeah. We need to be together and band together and be a unit. This means all people, not just Black people. This means people, humans, human beings. Take a stand for yourself. Take a stand for your neighborhood. Don't, you know, keep your neighborhoods up. We have to live in them. keep our people out of prison. We don't need to have our men going to prison, and then our women are struggling to get them out, having to pay bail, having to give up money. We don't have money as it is. I mean, I'm hoping that at some point we can start to really see that people are and can band together, stick together against one common force that is always trying to do us in, is always trying to mess us up, always trying to keep us down. We can do it. We are so smart. We are intelligent. We have businesses. We have all kinds of skills at our disposal that we don't even know we have. Put them to the use. I seen it after all the stuff that happened in the different cities, but especially in Philadelphia, where a lot of the stores were looted and broken into, and it's trash on the sidewalk and all. You know what? It did my heart so much good when I saw people coming out there and cleaning up. But that's a big thing. That's a big thing, because it showed to me that, yeah, this happened, but we understand it, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to get behind our people. We may not be able to be on the front line. We may not be able to demonstrate. We may not be able to have a voice in the way that other people do, but we can do this. They came out and cleaned up those streets. They stood behind, as far as I was concerned, stood behind the protest by doing. And to me, that was such a big thing, and that was so heartfelt, because I felt like they could. Interviews were all positive. They were like, "Look, yeah, we don't like it, but and what we can do. And use that opportunity to remain strong and to support one another. Stop killing each other. Stop vandalizing. Stop breaking in people's homes. We got so much better. Anyway, on the move. That's what I hope.
Gil Scott got a record called Song of the Wind. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he said there's a need for peace written on everybody's face, man. Mm-hmm. There's a need for peace written on everybody's face. When people come out there and demonstrate their righteous anger, man, that's what they want. That's all they want.
Mm-hmm. Peace.
It's a need for peace written on everybody's face, man. They're tired of this stuff, man. Tired of these images, tired of seeing, folks suffering and moms crying and dads grieving, man. They're tired of this stuff, man. So that's it, man.
All right, let's close out. We had 3 questions, so we're going to close out on these 3 questions. I feel like the first one you've pretty much already covered, but this question's about your position on prison abolition, and this person would like to hear your thoughts on as a society we need to take the movement against prisons. So, but I feel like that's pretty much been inherent in the conversation. But if there's something else you want to say more about that, you can do that. The other 2, I think, weave in nicely together. So one is a question specifically for Debbie as a mother. What do you think is the most important thing to teach our children? And then for Mike Africa Jr., a similar parenting sort of question. How did your experience impact your own parenting? I assume the experience that you have had, with your parents. So. And I think inherent in that initial question as a mother, what do you think is important to teach our children? Mike Sr., you could also answer that question as a father. So let's close that on that, because I think, the picture that you all wanted to have as for the website kind of speaks to that, because this is about family. So we'll close out on that note.
Well, I think it's important to teach our children to love, to protect ourselves, to protect themselves, and to love life, period. And when I say love life, I don't mean turn the other cheek because you're full of this love and somebody might be spitting on you and you're supposed to just take it because no. It just means to protect yourself, self-preservation. And I think with that, loving life, that doesn't mean taking a turtle in your house and, like keeping it in a cage. It means to free them, let them be free. It means to endorse the freedom of those animals. So I think that the one thing I would say to teach your children to love, to be caring, and self-preservation.
Yeah, I'd say, you saying something, Mike?
No, go ahead, Dad.
No, I was just saying that, you know, the things we all cherish, the things we all should cherish, you know, that's respect for life and love of life, man, and concern for, you know, your fellow folks, you know, and if you are successful in that, then a lot of this stuff would not be happening, man, you know, but you got to push that, you know, you got to example that. You know, and when, you know, you got to fight when you know you're right too. You know, you got to stand up when you know you're right. And if somebody ain't holding true to those ideas, then you got to tell them about it or show them about it. You know, but, you know, you just got to be respectful and peaceful, man, you know.
The thing that I take away from my experience is probably best said in a quote from John Africa. He said, anybody can tell you something that's right. And not having my parents with me all the time kind of forced me to take advice from other people that I, in many cases, would never have listened to because of their reputation, history, whatever. Or proximity, I just wouldn't have listened to what they said. But having to kind of fend for myself in many situations, I had to rely on the information from people that, you know, turned out to be very beneficial. And so you have to listen to what is right and allow that to guide you. And it's more about that than it is, in many cases, it's more about that than it is the people that is delivering the information. And I think that's what I try to instill in my children. I try to teach them to follow what's right and allow that to be their guiding force, because, you know, people make mistakes, but the power of righteousness will never betray you.
It's a nice place to end. So thank you very much. This was an incredible conversation, and I feel very privileged to be able to join y'all in this discussion. So thank you, and thank you for who you are and just all the things that you've done. So many ways, these things couldn't be possible without the sacrifices that you all have made. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having us. Thank you to the audience that watched us. And for just to, you know, for people that want to get in touch further with us, they can visit our website. I have a website for Seed of Wisdom, and the best way to reach that website is mikeafricajr.com. I would send you to the Seed of Wisdom website, but there's another organization called Seed of Wisdom, and they're much bigger than we are. So a lot of times our people that's trying to find us ends up finding them, and it gets confusing. So people can come to my website at www.mikeafricajr.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Right.
Okay.
It's also in the chat box too, that information.
Excellent. So. Thank you, and thank you, James and Natalie and everybody else that worked hard to put this together. We appreciate you.
All right, thank you, James, Natalie, and Karen, and
for all the folks who's listening.
Everybody that's listening,
yeah.
everybody. Yep, we appreciate you tuning in. And I'm sorry.
Be safe out there, everybody.
All right, have a good night.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.